Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back. It's Grant Cameron with Desta and Matt, and we're doing this fascinating new discussion about Apports, which is very, very important stuff. And I've actually got my new one here. I don't know if you can see it. This is the one from, we showed the pile of dirt. This is the other one that really amazed me, where it's like really weird, where the phenomena strings it through the zipper. Like, that's totally impossible. And it's like you look at it and you go like, weird. How the heck did they do that?
The zipper on her purse.
That from her zipper on her purse, yeah. And that's like, and she had marks on her arm. She had the classic stuff, the all sorts of weird stuff happening. And that's what the Apport thing is. It's one of the weird things that they do, and I call it the theory of wow. Is they just do this really weird stuff that make you scratch your head and wonder what's going on. You get down the rabbit hole and you can't get out. Mm-hmm. So we were talking about Lilydale, and you've got some photos of Shane, and we'll go through that now and maybe promote this Lilydale conference that you're going to be at, and then maybe we'll do that first, and then we'll talk a little bit about the one that I want to come to. But
yeah, so Lilydale. So again, we're lucky that I'm only now not even, I think it's 2 hours, just over 2 hours away from Lilydale. So it's in New York, but it's the southern part of Lake Erie. So it's like New York, but way, 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 not by New York City, by Toronto, And so Shannon, we've had on the show before, and we'll have her on again soon. This is her beautiful hardcover book, Seances, and she's traveled all over, and she has a picture here of Mychael Shane, and that's the cloth that they use where he spits the Apports out, and I don't know how close I can get, but that's him with the Apports coming out of his mouth anyway.
Yeah.
So we're going to see her. So it's July 27th and 28th. It's just, they have conferences there every single weekend, and there's a lot of stuff going on there, but we're going to see her presentation, and it has a bunch of the original Lilydale when it started, which I think was like almost 100 years ago. I think it was the turn of the 1920 or 30 or something like that. And so they're going to have a bunch of presentations on the history of Lilydale itself. So we're going for that. The July 27th and 28th.
That'd be neat.
Mm-hmm.
So where we left off in the last video,
billets.
We were talking about billets. And can you explain what billets are again?
Well, so this is like linking the fact of how, even if you can say that you can't believe the Apports and he somehow regurgitated them or piled them in his mouth or whatever, it's not the only thing he does. Like, so the other few tricks is the Lady Nada, her talking through the trumpet, which we'll talk about later. And the one that blew Matt's mind away was the billet. Oh, the billet reading. I have to sneeze. Oh. Sorry, I have to sneeze. So the billet reading is
like a one-on-one.
So the billet reading is so all of the people that were in this seance, it was all in the light.
Everyone was sitting in a circle, chair of circles, with Mychael and his what do you call them? Handlers?
Yeah. Well,
People work with his team. And so billets are people just write on paper. They ask a question.
Any question in the world that you would want, that you can't get an answer to, that you want a medium to read.
Everyone gets a card, and there's a number on the card for what chair you're sitting in. So the chair is
no, babe. No. So everyone gets a piece of paper to write your question on, and then they say make a number, your favorite number, any number in the whole world. It could be 1 digit, 3 digits, 5 digits, any number on the back.
Thinking of another sound. Yeah. So Mychael is sitting there, and he first explains, what to write on the card. Ask a question. The question should be asked in a certain way. It can't be a yes or no answer. You can't write, is my brother with us? Yes or no? That doesn't work, apparently, for some reason.
Because if you want like a detailed answer, don't just ask a yes no question, right. Is what they said to us before. Someone in the audience that had been with Mychael before said, don't just do that, because then you're just going to get a yes no. Make it so that the question is more open-ended, so you can get more information than just the yes no. Don't just ask a yes no question.
So I went in there and they explained this, and I was just like, wow, this doesn't sound very impressive at all. But by the end of it, I was completely blown away. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen for any psychic medium stuff. It was pretty impressive. So Michael's blindfolded. He gets these 2 big silver coins
That he apported.
and he puts those over his eyes first, and then he puts duct tape over those 2 coins to hold them onto his eyes. And then he puts on this big, like what you wear to sleep to cover your eyes, like a nightshade thing.
Like the blindfolded.
And it's pretty big. It's got huge coverage. It comes pretty far down on his face and up onto his forehead. And then he has a bandana that he puts over that. So there's the coins, the duct tape, the eye cover,
blackout blindfold thing.
Blindfold, and then a bandana. So he's got 4 layers. And each person in the audience comes up and does it. One person puts the duct tape on, one person puts the nightshade on, and the other person puts the bandana on.
Just so, and then he has people like making sure he can't see through it.
It's obvious he can't see because it comes down way, way over the bottom of it. Like he can't be looking down. So everyone writes on their card, on their billet,
a question on one side and any number that they want on the other side.
Yeah, a number that relates to them on the other side. And then those are all thrown into a basket. And one of his team has the basket. And so Michael's blindfolded through this whole process. He can't see what people are writing on the thing. There's only 2 other people that are working with him, elderly people. And I don't think they're the type of people that could, be giving him clues or
no one's allowed to touch him. They actually said that no one's allowed to touch him to make sure that there's no code, that someone's tapping them with the number or whatever. No one's allowed to touch them. So
yeah, and I was watching very carefully. I was trying to figure out, okay, there's got to be something to this. But Michael right away just quickly reaches his hand into the thing, pulls out a thing, and he's rubbing it on his lap.
And his face is almost always in a different direction. So he's not even looking at the card. He's over here and he's rubbing this, trying to figure out what the question is on his leg while he's looking that way.
And there's like no hesitation. Right away, he just reads it. He goes, okay, this is number 1111.
And then he shows it to the assistant and she verifies it. So she says, yep, number 1111. So whoever in the audience now, because there's only 30 of us or whatever, knows, okay, this is my question. That's how they preface it, is he's guessed the number 100% right, and now that person is waiting for the answer to the question. He doesn't read the answer he doesn't read the question. He says the answer is, and he says the answer, and then his assistant reads the question. So everyone can hear an answer and then a question. So everyone knows, the person who's listening really can get it, but everyone knows, does those 2 things line up? Does it even make sense? Because he goes very, very in detail with the answer. It's not just like, your cousin Bob. It's like, he talks for an entire minute with the answer. And then she says, the question is, my son is sick and I wonder if he should go to the doctor and who he should see. And then the whole thing, he's just going, oh, your son's not really with us. He's half in this world and half in another world, and saying all these crazy things. And then you hear what the question is. So it's triply verified kind of, right?
Yeah, and it's quite amazing, like the speed that he does it. He's able to just rub it in his hand. So there's no way he could be peeking through the blindfold because he can't even see the card. And you can tell that he's not even looking at the card. He just touches it and rubs it. And so I try to trip him up with my question.
They said at the beginning, do not ask a yes or no. And I'm thinking about him, just please don't embarrass me, really. But that he gets the number, math number.
Yeah.
He says number whatever, and he says the answer. He says this person didn't follow the instructions.
Right away. Yeah.
That's what he said.
This person didn't do it.
The answer is yes. And then he is kind of mad about it because, and I'm like thinking that can't be yours. Did you actually do it? Why would you do that? Because that's the whole point.
I couldn't think of a question to ask. And so I was everyone was handing the cards in. So I just said, well, if a friend of mine passed away, and I said, well, is my friend of mine, is this guy with us? Is he with me? Does he follow me around? And I didn't think, I'm like, oh, that's, whoops. Okay, I'll just leave it. That's kind of.
I bet he did it on purpose to trick him. But just to see, because he said, don't ask a yes no question. So he's the only person, of course, out of the 30 people that asked a yes no question. But the second Michael felt it, he said, this person didn't follow the instructions. The answer is yes. And then he just went right to the next one. Yeah. And the crazy thing, we won't have to tell him what they said about mine, but the crazy thing is, mine was towards the end. Like he went through a lot of people. Mine was towards the end, and he just picked up a card and he said, we can't answer this now. We're going to do this later. Hold this.
Yeah, and that was the only
And he
one.
gave it to his assistant. And the instant that he said that, I knew it was my card.
Yeah, there was
and Matt knew it was my card too.
It was a weird hesitation where he picked up one and he got this weird kind of, he shuffled around a bit and he said, yeah, we can't, this is something, we'll do this one after. And yeah, just like Desta said, it's like, we knew that it was hers. I had this intuition that it was, I was like, oh, that's Desta's. I knew
it was mine too. And I'm like, oh no. But, and then even at the end, he takes off the tape and puts his glasses on, and then he reads it. He goes, oh, I thought they usually only do this for people who don't follow the instructions, but which is weird because Matt didn't follow the instructions. But he said, but this isn't that. And so he read mine and then did, like, in front of everyone, did like a 10-minute crazy thing about me, about mine, after the whole entire thing was over. Yeah. And yeah, so that was very.
What's the question? We're all curious now.
Well,
I'll let Desta answer.
It was, he didn't even, I can't even remember what the question was, but he I don't want to say it. I don't want to.
It was pretty interesting. It just seemed like in other seances that we were there, it was like Desta and I were sitting beside each other. But for people who didn't know us, you couldn't tell that we were a couple. Maybe we were just coworkers or friends, right? It wasn't like we were constantly kissing or groping each other all the time. It wasn't obvious that we were a couple. But it seemed like almost in every seance, like Desta and I were singled out in the room, and there was information coming back that portrayed to our life that was pretty accurate and pretty spooky. Mm-hmm. Things about things we might do in the future, and possibly looking at homes and property we were buying, and it was pretty spooky. It was pretty spooky.
Yeah, so it was I thought it was very sweet that it seemed like, I don't know how that was singled out, because he wouldn't have known it was mine, even if he could tell, because he was just picking out of a hat. He could have picked any number, but it does seem like the rest of the time we had like a little bit of special treatment. It was very nice, but I got the longest reading out of anyone, and it was like a very good.
Yeah, it was. I was completely blown away after that. I was trying to figure out, like, and the information, he was just grabbing the cards so fast and just rubbing them and holding them, and he's reading it, and like, yeah.
He got every one right. Every number, he got 100% right, every single one, and every single question when he read the answer. And I was trying really hard to figure out what could the question be as he was saying the answer. And then when they said the question, there's no way. It's impossible, because he had such detailed answers. You can't be that detailed. Like he was sometimes specifically talking about your son, blah, 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 blah. And then what's the question? I want to know if my son, blah, blah, blah. It was like impossible, like really impossible. So that psychically, again, if you think that the Apports is, or the trumpet or whatever, if you think that there's a hoax going on here, it's impossible. This is like not part of the physical medium part, but it's the most believable. And you think, so it's impossible for him to have faked the Apports, 1,700 things blowing out of his mouth. It's impossible. So then you think, like, wow, if you're there and you do enough of them, you think there has to be something to all this. It's impossible for someone to sit in a handful of them. I mean, maybe there's some that don't go right or whatever, but I mean, if you were really interested and sat in a handful of them, I can't even believe that anyone would go away and try and disprove it. It's impossible.
Okay, so let's get to the spirit guides. Who's controlling the thing, and do we have any history of have they been on Earth, or what's that all about?
So his spirit team is the Ascended Masters, right? So the Ascended Masters, there's a whole bunch of them. He deals with Jesus a lot. When I was in the first one in Toronto, he was talking about Jesus a lot, but he didn't come through or anything. But he does come through, apparently. He has crazy stories about him materializing in the middle of the circle. And when I was at the one in Toronto, I didn't see anything. I don't think anyone else did, but the main woman, who was bawling her eyes out, said that Jesus' face came right up to hers and kissed her. And I think she had just lost her, I forget what the story was now. She just lost her husband or her son or something. But he says that Jesus has come before and manifested himself in the middle of the circle in the pitch black, where everyone could see him. And so the Ascended Masters, there's a whole bunch of them. So Lady Nada is his main is his main person that speaks to the trumpet. But sometimes, I can't remember who the other person was. He said maybe this other person was going to come through, but he didn't. He wasn't ready or something to come through. So sometimes there's messages from other of the Ascended Masters as well. But Lady Nada has been with him since he was, I think he said 6 years old or something like that, his whole life. So she's the main person that speaks to the trumpet and that he gets all of his information from. And she is an Ascended Master. She's supposed to be Jesus's mother, right? It's Mary.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Lady Nada. He says she picked the name Nada because she doesn't want to be recognized as one specific thing. So she says Nada as in like nothing. Like,
and this is someone who's been speaking to Mychael since he was a kid. This is
yeah,
someone who he's channeled for quite a while.
Yeah. And so she, yeah, so he's his.
So, okay, so let's go to the future. What are you planning to do? We're going to interview him. What are you planning to do?
But you're
where
going
do
to
we go from
come.
here?
You're coming here to
Yeah.
Toronto. We're going to see him in Toronto in a seance in September. But in September as well, when he's in this area, he's also going back to Akron to Steph's Healing Brew, and I'm going to see him there. And he's going back to Lilydale. So I'm going to see him in all three. Or I can't even remember now if it's Lilydale. There's another place that it seems like there's a bunch of seances that I can't even remember the name of the place near Buffalo, New York. Can't remember now, but apparently they're all over the place around here. And there's a bunch of institutes that I also didn't realize were very, very close to here. I just realized that the Seth home was just on the other side of the border in New York there. And there's that Omega Institute, which Mychael, so the Seth, Jane Robert channeling Seth is just on the other side of the border in New York right there as well. I think Ryan University is right there. There's like tons of things that are right across the border from here. So we haven't even investigated them all, but I'll see Mychael. So those 3 times in September, yeah, and then I'm taking I'm going to take the physical mediumship course through him.
Do you know what Mychael's doing in September? Is it going to be the same thing? Apports?
No, he doesn't know. Depending on how many people I think that sign up. So sometimes he does 1 day is Apports and 1 day is the healing. And we went to one that was the question and answer, where Lady Nada just answered the questions the whole entire time. So I think it's like he does a handful of things. It's the billet reading, the Apports, the healing, or the question and answer with Lady Nada. Yeah. So we don't know which one he's doing in September yet. They tell him what he should do depending on who has registered or whatever, I guess, right?
Wow. Yeah, it's pretty interesting to witness that, just the Apports and the billets, but there's still like a personal level to it where some of the information that Mychael gives you, like when he gives you the Apports at the end, he says like, Matt, this one's for you, and this one's from so and so, and this stone here represents this. And sometimes one of them was a little vague, but most of them I got from him were pretty interesting. I forget what it was, but when he said something, it's like, this stone is for this purpose, and he doesn't know anything about me. Like I don't think he could have did a background check on me. There's no way, because there's nothing about me online that he could have, looked into. And so he's really giving each person personal advice or information that relates to their life. It's pretty interesting. It's a pretty neat experience to be involved with that. Yeah,
he says that the Apports, when they come through, that they each have a tiny, like, not physical, but psychic, I guess, red thread attached to them, and the thread goes to the person. So he knows how to give each tiny, how many of the Apports to give to each person based on what he said, how he explained it was before the event even took place. The guides, or for him, the spirit team, his Ascended Masters, they knew that you were going to come to the seance. So they already started figuring out what physically or physiologically or mentally or, spiritually you needed. And they started directing which of the Apports come through, go to each person, and for what purpose. So he looks at them as soon as they come out, and he says, this is a red thread to that person. So you come up, and he says, this is from Archangel Mychael. And he says, this is for healing because you just lost a pet, or whatever. Like this. So those are the kind of messages. Each one has a very specific meaning. Excuse me. And he knows which one is for which person because he sees this red thread that goes to each person that's linking them to each of the Apports. So all the Apports are coming through for a reason. It's because they're connected to the people. And so it's kind of like Antarel. I'm in my head, like likening a lot of this stuff of seance to actually these things with Ricardo and Terrell, and it's just like, remember a couple of those times when we were at Mount Shasta, they were saying like, Ricardo would say something like, there's not many people that go and do this. So the fact that some of you have traveled, me and you, of course, had traveled the farthest away, like in the car from Winnipeg, it was wasn't it a 44-hour drive?
3-day drive, yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy. So he said, a lot of people don't do this kind of thing. And so a lot of you have made a huge journey out of this, and don't worry, the beings, and Terrell, and the Acunians, they know that you've come here for this. So what they're going to do, so sometimes they do the crystal ceremony and they do different things. But when me and you were there, they did the thing where they said, we've put something into everyone's water. Remember? Because I was so excited because I had that gigantic 5-gallon, that huge camping water thing that took up the entire back seat. He says, we've put something into your water. And this is something where, we've not blessed. He didn't use the word blessed, but it's kind of like, we've blessed all the water that you guys have had here. And as you drink it, you're going to get something. And like, that's going to like open up bits of you, and like your life is going to change in some kind of a way. And so it's like, we're going to give you a gift for making the effort in doing this. And that's kind of like what Mychael was saying too, is that Lady Nada said, like, something like, today is the first day of the rest of your life, or something like that. Like, this is the day that you're going to change forever. And then it's like, so here's your message. And so here's your apport, and here's your little personal message that goes with it. It's kind of like a gift for showing up and for showing your interest, and, and making the effort, because a lot of people won't make the effort, have no interest in it. So this is like, it's kind of like your theory of wow. It's kind of like a personal thing where you go, holy crap, this is like, how would he have known this? Or how would she have been able to answer this? Or I really needed this stone, because how could they, like all these little things, just like Terrell, it's just like a personal thing where you're given something for your effort.
Yeah, you have to, I've told the story many times. You have to tell a story. I thought you were going to tell it. I thought about it, and then you started talking, but tell a story. We're driving from wherever it was, Wyoming to Reno, Nevada on the second day or whatever, and your phone rings. Tell that story about that. That's the whole thing that blew me away, because I'd gotten it before from Chris Bledsoe. That's why I said to you, what is the message? And like, you got the message that we were coming. They knew we were coming.
So Kat called and said that oh my gosh, I can't even remember. She got a message from Ricardo, told Paula, and Paula told Kat, and Kat told us. And the message was, and this is when we had been driving for 2 straight days. And it was boiling hot. It was like 100 degrees. We were in the little car together for days and days and days, getting all the way through the States down to California. And so the message was, Terrell knows you're coming. Like, and so there's going to be a program sighting. Like, we know. So it's that thing too. You're making a huge effort. So we're going to make sure we come, because he doesn't always come. I went to Spain. I don't think I've ever said this before, but I went to see Ricardo in Spain. And he told me before the whole thing even started, he said, Desta, I'm sorry you came so far. Think of that, Spain from Winnipeg. Like, that was crazy. And driving, I met Chris Rosing, and I met all these people, and we rented a car and drove from France. I can't even remember now. From Toulouse, France, we rented a car and drove all the way into the Pyrenees to go to this tiny little place to see Ricardo. And I had flown obviously overseas from Winnipeg. And right when I got there, he said, I'm so sorry, but they're not coming. There's not going to be a program sighting tonight. I'm like, oh my God. I never even thought that was possible, because there was all the other times we had gone to see him. And I just said, really? And he said, the group isn't cohesive enough. He said, the energy just isn't there. They're not going to come tonight. I'm sorry. And it was like, I had to like make peace with the fact it was a beautiful, insane setting. But that's the thing sometimes, right? It's like, and that's the thing with these circles. And so in my head for weeks and weeks since this first time I saw Mychael Shane, is I've been just like, trying to link the patterns together with all this other stuff that we've been studying this, years and years and years now. And I think that is a big thing. It's kind of the same. The circle in a seance is like a cohesive, everyone has to, and I got on Robin Foy's book, in pursuit of, I can't remember what it's called, but it's a physical medium, from Robin Foy from the School Experiment, has that. He wrote one book, right? It's called like In Pursuit of Physical Mediumship or something. And I just read that, and he's kind of saying the same thing. It's like he's been in circle after circle after circle his whole entire life, living in all these different cities and trying to get different circles and doing different seances and seeing what the effects are. And it seems like it's the same thing. It's like if the circle is really cohesive, everyone's really down, wants to see something, believes it, is really like putting all their energy into it, they get a better effect. And so a lot of sitters, they'll test people and they'll just say, yeah, come for a couple times and let's just see how it goes. And if it doesn't go good, they don't have that person in the circle. Because, and that's the same with Ricardo's thing, like sometimes it works really good and sometimes it doesn't. If there's too many people that either don't believe or aren't into it or whatever, you could see. And that's why we were in the first one with Matt and we were supposed to be oming. And I hate doing things out loud. Like the entire rest of my life, you couldn't pay me to be like singing in church or doing anything out loud in front of people. So if they ever said like, everyone sing along or clap along, never, I would never do it. But I've learned this through Ricardo, that you have to ohm. The point is, so he wasn't oming and I'm like, you have to do it.
It was. But
I was like, this is how this works. Like if they can tell that not everyone is super into it, they're not going to come. So I was like all panicked, like you don't want to, you know, because it's pretty devastating. Like for me, going all the way to Spain and it's like they're not coming. I was like, oh my God, like this is the furthest. I thought this was going to be the craziest one because I was with, you know, more Spanish speaking people instead of, you know, him trying to translate everything into English because he was in he was in California. So I thought it would be like even more of this magical experience. So anyways, so that's, I think, what it is. It's like group cohesion and everyone being really into it and singing and oming and, you know, wanting to see something. And, you know, but the Spanish group, like everyone was talking. Everyone was just talking. They weren't even listening to him. They were all like joking. And remember when we went to see at East Eddie, me and you, when that podcast was going on, everyone was just like, oh my God, it was so annoying. And it's just like, they're never going to come. Like, it's never going to be something if it's a total, like, everyone's talking about like, not the same thing. They're not even all talking about UFOs. They were talking about like, you know, their
podcast.
Podcast. Oh my God, it was, so it's just like, it's never going to work. I think there's something to that anyway.
And all the people that go to these seances too, they've all, you know, had problems in their life or recently lost loved ones, or they go there with the intention of reaching out to someone they lost. So I think that's a big part of it. I think that those people are open-minded. They go to a psychic because they know that that's a channel to the spirit world, right? And they have that intention the whole time. And that's what I did. You know, I really wanted to get some sort of confirmation about people that have passed away in my life that I wanted to speak with. And I think if you set that and you hold on to that, I think pretty neat things happen.
I think that helps the spirit come too, right? So I think that the more that everyone's there, like assuming it's going to work, like not hoping it's going to work and not being so skeptical that it might not work, but everyone's there like, I have to talk to this person. So it's just like, it's already partially happened kind of thing, right? And if like he says that all these Apports are, you know, figured out a day before you get there because they know who's going to be attending, it's kind of the same as Ricardo saying, it's not going to happen. Like he knew it wasn't going to happen, right? So it's like the spirit team or the aliens or the whatever it is, they know if it's going to work or not, if this is going to be a good group and if something crazy is going to come. And same with Stephen Greer would always say that for some of those some of his, you know, get-togethers or whatever, that this is going to be a special one and something crazy happens. Well, why does something crazy only happens sometimes when you're in a CE5 and sometimes nothing? Well, maybe that's it. Maybe it's kind of like a seance circle and it's a group of people and maybe not everyone is really feeling it. Maybe whatever, I don't know, but
Matt may not know, but you probably know the story about the Philip experiment that was done in Toronto in 1970s, and that was where they were doing a seance thing, and they were trying to get a hold. They made up a ghost, so they make this guy's name and give him a past or whatever, and they want to see if they can manifest this ghost. And they sit there and meditate for an entire year, every week for an entire year, and nothing happens. And then someone says, well, why don't you do it like a seance? Why don't you like sing 99 bottles of beer on the wall and raise the vibration? And they said the first time they did it, boom, the ghost was there. And they started to have this interaction with this ghost. And it's the same thing as Ricardo, this idea where you raise your vibration and the beings lower their vibration and you meet in between, but you got to raise your vibration, otherwise nothing's going to happen.
Yeah. And interesting that they're oming as well. So Julie's, we went to Julie Adreani is another was the red light seance that we went to. She's one of, and she's actually helping teach the class, as far as I know, that I'm going to be taking in September. And she's his like, you know, most recent student kind of thing that's now doing this physical mediumship. She was a medium before, but she oh no, I forgot what I was going to say. Julie. Oh, darn.
You're going to take her course. Is she going to be in Lilydale?
She's coming. She travels with them.
Are we interviewing these people?
Yeah,
people
we're going to interview her as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So what about the other people that you met? I mean, you met some other contacts in terms of people that, because there'll be other, say, physical mediums who are there who are, you know, you don't know until it's all over who's actually sitting in the circle. Are there other stories that we can sort of follow up on here, or this group in terms of who's doing what? Because you seem to have gotten into this whole new group of very interesting stories.
Well, that's why we're going to stay in Lilydale for that conference. And there's a bunch of them. You know, Raymond Moody is he's actually speaking, I think, next weekend. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to go, but I would almost like, because it's only 2.5 hours or something, I might just go see him for the day, because I've never seen him speak in person as well.
Wow.
But you know,
let me tell the weird story before I forget. I'm doing the book on the theory of wow, and I talk about like last night I was writing up the connection between nuclear weapons and different events. And Betty and Barney Hill, there was almost a nuclear war 12 days before Betty and Barney Hill were abducted, and just after Nancy Train. It started with Nancy Train in July, and so I was now I forgot my train of thought here. So I'm writing up all this stuff. Now I've forgotten what I was going to say. It was pretty important, but you can keep going.
Something's just happened here.
Was it Theory of Wow, the book you're writing?
Yeah, it's the but there was something I can't remember if you were talking about that you were just
like
talking
people in
about.
Lilydale, or people that were new people that were just about to start following their stories, mediums or something like that.
It's completely gone. That's the thing. You get in the field and it's there, and then you go into the field and it's like
Grant, what do you
disappearing.
Grant, what do you think is behind the Apports and these seances? What's your
take? Again, I think it's like to me it's right what I'm describing it as naive reality. We have this idea where the five senses, it tells us this, that the world's flat, the sun goes around the earth because that's the way it looks. You know, there's only so many stars in the sky and stuff like that. And so I think what they're doing is they're shattering naive reality. You think you got it all figured out, and then they do this weird thing, and then you go, whoa, and then you sort of get in and you go, and then you realize this is wrong, and then you move on to the next thing. And they're just doing these really weird things. And Apports are the same sort of thing. They're people from the spirit world who are trying to raise consciousness, and raising consciousness is shattering this naive reality that the world is not the way you think it is. And it just gets more and more complex and weirder and weirder and weirder as you go along. So you have things like the hand that interested me when I interviewed Leslie Kean. That's all I was interested in Leslie Kean was the thing about the hand. I mean, with this, the Stuart Alexander, the one that she follows, this physical medium in Great Britain. And I just said, Leslie, I mean, you're a New York Times reporter. I mean, did you actually see this hand? And was that for real? It's like, because it's like you say, when you're there, it's a different story. You know it's for real, but you're hearing it from the outside. You're going, oh, I don't know. And did you actually? He said, yeah, it was a real hand. And you could feel it and touch it, and you could feel the knuckles and the tendons and stuff like that. And that's the kind of stuff where it just sort of puts you on your rear end, and you're going like, what is going on here? And so that to me, it's this idea where they just keep doing these weird things. And the more people explore, the more you get to a situation like 1947 when they started showing up in UFOs and flying around UFOs. And they do this for years and years. And everyone goes, no, I don't believe it. Yeah, and skeptic. And it goes on. And then 2017, New York Times comes out and says, oh, yeah, it's for real. The government is actually investigating UFOs. And everybody goes, yeah, I knew that already. And it just raises the consciousness where everybody just sort of accepts it. And yeah, we know this. I mean, they just put it down or whatever. But they're just putting us in this world that it's a completely different world than what we think. And that's why it's weird. Like that's why the book is called Weird. It's like there's nothing there that isn't really weird, where you go like, you're not going to believe this. It's like what they called in remote viewing, this the 8 martini experiences, where it's like, oh, I need 8 martinis to get over this. You just can't believe it's actually happened. And that's what happened to Desta and I, where you see with the Apports, what happened with the Apports is like the hitchhiker effect. So when I had that experience with Ray Hernandez, he's telling me about these Apports at LAX airport, and I go, what are you talking about? And then I start researching it, and then I find this synchronicity that there's an Apport collection at University of Manitoba, and then I move on from that, and then suddenly it starts following me around, and then we have the thing with you probably know the story we do in the book with the feathers, where it ends up at the end where Desta comes walking into this gift shop with this feather, and I'm going, get out of here! All these feather Apport experiences with all these people, and then suddenly we're in the middle of this thing, and then I'm doing my PowerPoint presentation, which I don't talk about much because people, unless you've done PowerPoint, you really don't understand the weirdness of this thing. Where I go there to test my PowerPoint the night before I'm going to lecture, and it's got all my PowerPoint slides are doubled, tripled, stretched, pushed together. One's flipped on its side. The audios are on different slides, which is totally impossible. You simply cannot do it. Once you embed an audio on a slide, it doesn't go to another slide. And then the guy that's doing Paula's presentation says, well, maybe you made a mistake. I go, I did PowerPoint. I did not do this. There's no way I did this. And I remember leaving the stage, and I was furious. I was going back and saying, I'm going to reload this thing. I'm going to go back and take it off my computer again in the room, because I had on a little disk drive. And so I go, and then Paul says, you come into the restaurant, the Italian restaurant at 8 o'clock? I said, no, Paul, I got problems with my PowerPoint. I got to straighten it out. And she says, you know what's going on, don't you? And I said, no, Paul, that's not what's going on. And I go back to the hotel room, and I look at the screen. I've got the little slides, and I look at it. And it's completely normal. And I'm going, oh. So I take it, and I clean the thumb drive completely clean, and I load it again. I go back up there, same thing. And I just told the guy, take all the doubles off, take all the triples off, take all the audios off. Just I'll wing the thing. And it was just like, I couldn't believe, like, how the hell did they do this? It was just so weird.
I was just going to add too. I know Matt has something to say. I'm going to make a note so I don't lose my train of thought too. But I have to say too that about like weird synchronicities tying into all this stuff, I have to say that like since we've been doing this, so like these seances, and we've gone to the States a couple times, and I always go to every used bookstore, and I bought like hundreds of new used books, and just like, again, the more I think how we keep saying too, the whole, I don't know if it's John Keel, but the whole thing, like the more you look into the phenomena, the more the phenomena looks back at you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like the more attached you are. And I realized this when I used to channel a lot, and I started channeling more now too. And I'm realizing that like with these seances, and constantly, because when your worldview or when your reality shifts enough, so like what these seances, I'm just like going to sleep every night and just thinking like, what did the hand feel like? How could it have been something else? How were you just miraculously healed? Like, how are all these different things together? Like, how is this really possible? Even though, of course, I've always believed in it, but when you're actually seeing it and trying to figure out what that means for your own personal sense of how reality is being constructed on a daily basis, for me, the more that these things are happening, I can feel it some days now where it just feels like something weird and big is shifting up. Like, I don't even know how to say it, but it what backs it up for me is that I've lived here for about a year, and I used to always talk about that I get these hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations all the time. So I get them my whole entire life, but they go, and sometimes I don't get them at all. Like this whole entire year, I haven't had any. So we've been working like crazy and been super busy, moving in, doing all these things. And so just since all this seance stuff started happening, I've been having the craziest hypnagogic things in the middle of the night as well. So it's like, it's making me wonder also, is that kind of like your theory of, wow, am I seeing these things in the middle of the night because it's like a stress related thing? And I'm still trying to figure out as well what brings them on more. But just saw like a bird fly through the window, and it like was living in a nest in the top of like just above the bed kind of thing in the ceiling of our bedroom. And I was just like, it's like, what do these things mean? Are they happening more now because your reality is shifting, because you're like really trying to wonder into what exactly is happening and how this affects your normal daily life, and if you either have more control over it, or if the spirits have more control of it, the aliens have more control of it, like what the grounds of your own personal reality is or whatever. And I have to think that the more of these things, the books I'm reading, we're traveling, going to these conferences, these seances, these apports and all this stuff. And it's like, is more crazy things happening because we're looking more at it? So more of it is looking back at us, but I can tell for different phases of my life. And so now I'm channeling more too. So I think that it's like some pocket or something where you like get a closer view of what is happening, and it's helping you. It's like helping make the I don't even know how to really describe it, but it's like
influencing or manipulating.
Well, so that's of course what some people could say, it's manipulate. And I told you that too, that we were listening to some podcast and they're saying like it's dragging you along this rabbit hole and it's going to ruin your whole life, and you know, you're going to come back after decades and say like you're just in the same position you were when you started looking at it. You don't know anymore about the phenomena. But I think it's the opposite, and I think it's like it's showing you, like your theory of wow, more things where you're going like, holy shit, what could that be? And why is it happening now? Why did I have no hypnagogic things for a year? Why was I hardly channeling all? Because we were so busy and we were so sidetracked by, you know, reality, like, or that part of the, you know, normal world. But the more you start looking into this and thinking about it all the time, reading books, going to seances, doing all these things, then it's just like I'm drawn more to be channeling. I'm getting crazier messages. I'm having more of these hypnagogic things, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm feeling even in normal life that something is put, and it just feels like it's pushing us up. Like I don't know what that means, but something is opening us up, pushing us up, making us one bit closer to actually figuring it out. I don't think we're going to figure it out by the time we're dead, but I mean, I'm not ever going to look back and think that it was a waste of time looking into it, because I still feel like it's still all like, even if it's just big wows, what is going on, it's still pretty crazy and pretty cool. And I'm still very happy to be part of it. And I certainly don't look at it like it's manipulating us and just making us waste all our time trying to go into a rabbit hole you're never going to figure out.
But it is changing. Like you and I wrote the book Contact Modalities, which is this whole thing. I'm big. More I look at it, the more I think right brain, left brain explains the paranormal. You got to understand right brain, left brain. And so the left brain is the skeptic. It's in the rational analytical brain, and it says, no, this is bullshit. And so Matt's very left brain and all this sort of stuff. And this is just hammering away at the left brain. And it's what the sort of the basis of the contact modality is to shut that thing down. So you say, okay, you know, count your breaths, and the left brain goes, oh, I can count breaths. I'm the best breath counter there is, and go down these stairs. I can walk downstairs. Yeah. And get, okay, now disappear, and we'll be back in half an hour to pick you up. And you get it out of the way, and then the right brain that's in contact with the universe can link in, but you got to get the left brain out of line. And that's part of the deal, is when Matt goes to these and suddenly you're in the middle of this thing and it's happening, your left brain is just going like, what the hell? It's just like, it just hammers it, and it shuts it down. And you suddenly realize, almost like when you're in the sort of the water, where to me, there's no levels, there's no colors, there's nothing. There's just, you're in the water, you're in the consciousness. And when the left brain is sort of shutting down, then you start to float higher in the water, out of the darkness towards the top of the water. And the higher you get, the more light there is, the more you can see. And that's what you're doing, is you're changing this sort of vibration. When the left brain's out of line, that we're gradually moving. And as you said, we're never going to, and I think they're starting to understand this, that everything may be, we're building it out of consciousness, and you're never going to understand reality. It's always going to be like a desktop icon, that there is no email on your desktop icon, there is no garbage on your desktop. That's just icons. That's things in between you and reality. You're never going to know what real reality is. But I think that's the whole thing, is this contact modality thing, that the more we go along, the more we have these experiences, the more we shut down that left brain just for a couple of seconds, and we can see the truth of what's going on. So the smaller self, as Paul Selig, the channeler, says, the small self thinks, the higher self knows. It's the ability to get the small self out of the way so that the higher self can know, because you know what it's like when you have the hypnagogic states or the channeling states. You go, I know that's real. It's I, or you're in the experience in the seance. I know that's real. Don't tell me that's not real. It's knowing versus just an opinion. You can get 100 people together from all walks of life, different religions, to say, what do you think about seances? You're going to get 100 different opinions. But when you get 10 people in a room, they're basically all going to say the same thing. Like, can you believe that actually happened? And it's this difference between just an impression, a small self that's an ego that doesn't have to read books, probably hasn't read a book in his whole life, and doesn't need a briefing, doesn't need nothing. I know about everything about anything, just ask me about anything, versus being in the field and knowing. And that's what we did with the contact modalities, is you try to find people who are in the field, people who have broken through, and for whatever reason, through the spirit guides or whatever is happening, when you pick up Mychael and you see what he does, you go like, we should be watching this guy. We should, explore, because this guy's got something. He's tapped into something, and that's what I think it is tapping in, is getting the small ego self out of the way, that's creating the noise, picking up the signal, and then running with the signal.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't wait to go in September with you, Grant. It'll be interesting to see what you.
Because I wanted to go. That our friend down in Florida, Walter, was going to bring in Kai Muga, and he was also going to bring in this Thompson guy, who was very hard to get in. They were trying to get me in, and he's very specific about who he has. And that's the one where they had, I wanted to see Louis Armstrong, where they bring Louis Armstrong in, and he sings. And then they brought in, I remember when you talk about the physical thing with the hands, I remember Walter, I think it was, he said, John Lennon. I said, wow, I'd love to see that. John Lennon. And I said, oh, was it real? I mean, was he actually real, like physical or whatever, John Lennon? He said, he was standing on my wife's foot. He was absolutely real. And that's the kind of stuff where you see that. So I wanted to go to that. And I was prepared to go down there and, pay the for a whole week of all these different sessions that they were going to do, and they're going to bring me in. So now we got these cheap flights. We can come into Toronto or into Kitchener, even Kitchener. I looked at Potter Airlines or something comes into Kitchener, where I think it was like it's $100 or something for both ways. So now you're in the ideal place where you get the bookings, and I'll fly in for the event, and that just fascinates me. It's you got to find these people who are in the field, and then learn something from them. And I'm just fascinated that you were able to film this thing. And if we could somehow capture it even closer up, I think it's a wonderful opportunity that we have in doing so. Hopefully you've written down all these beginning chapters about how this girl, what happened to the girl that originally contacted us? Are we going to interview her, or?
Yeah. So that's Steph. So yeah, we're definitely going to interview her, and she has a book out as well. So we'll do a whole, I don't know, maybe another panel or something like that, but we'll also do Julie and Mychael at the same time. And then one time we'll do Steph and talk about her shop and talk about her book, and if she's going to have another conference or whatever, and her mediumship skills as well.
Yeah, because what you find with this, and I maintain it's going to happen with the aliens too, is that there are no two aliens the same. There's no UFOs that are the same. And you see here as well, like everybody has their own little thing. It's like all the world's a stage, all the men and women and seance people are about actors, and they come in, and it's like everybody's got their own little sting. So one's bringing in Louis Armstrong, one's bringing in John Lennon, and this guy's doing the thing with the cards. And we're going to interview Lee. What's his first name?
Kevin.
From Florida.
Kevin
Lee. Yeah, because he has the thing where they do the physical thing, where the same sort of thing where they put this stuff in the box, and then they open the box up, and all the cards are written on, and that messages for people inside this box, and the box is on the table. How did they put the blank cards in there, and suddenly they got all these messages on them? I mean, that kind of stuff. Everybody's got their own little thing. Yeah. And it's almost like a different play, a different movie. Each one has a different movie, and they're all doing different things. It's not this. It's sort of the same, but they have their own little twist to the thing. So I'm fascinated with these stories of these people. And it seems, I don't know, like, I mean, you remember you mentioned the Skull Project, where they actually had Project Noah that physical mediumship had died out, and they had this Project Noah to bring it back, and that's where Skull got started. And so you see here, it looks like physical mediumship is alive and well. And I think it's one of the most. They always said it was one of the hardest things to do, as compared to just ordinary mediumship, where you got to make things appear and it takes a lot of energy and stuff like that. But I think there's a lot of opportunity, and it's very dramatic stuff. I mean, if you're talking theory of wow, and even Matt, you can attest. I mean, when you come out of there and you're going like, what the hell? I'm still like a little skeptical, but I don't know how the hell they did that. It's like if it's a fake, it's worth every dollar you pay to get in there. I mean, it's like, if they can do that, pretty good.
Whether you're a skeptic or not, I mean, you to still just experience it and to see it, you know, and to listen to all the information, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that in September. I'll definitely be there, because I was going to go to Florida, and this is much easier to go in there. And Lilydale, I've heard all about Lilydale and these conferences. And I'm supposed to go to the one that we did at the end of the book. We put in the one from that was given to us by Deb Frew in Illinois, that she went to out of Chicago. So that one I'd like to see as well. I mean, that to me is like, people want to go to the Super Bowl. I want to go to these seance things. Like that's like the Super Bowl. Like, oh my God, let's fly in there and see what's gonna.
Well, and you know what? We'll try and look at Lilydale when you're here, and we'll see if there's something there too. Because then, as long as you have your passport, we could just drive right down there too, make a whole thing of it. I just want to say one more thing. The reason I brought up the hypnagogic thing is because here's a crazy one too. Wow, because of all the Apports and the seances or whatever, one of the hypnagogic things I had one night is like, I woke up, like, you know, you wake up in the middle of the night or whatever, my eyes are open and I'm like seeing these things that they say are hallucinations or whatever. But I got up in bed and I turned the light on because I saw, like, in the middle of the bed, in the middle of the mattress, there was a hole. And I had one of these too that I told you before, the one when, like I told you that years ago, one when I looked in the middle of the mattress again and I saw the middle of the earth and all the water was rising. Yeah. So this is the only other time that I've ever had this one. But I looked in the middle of the bed and it was like a hole to the middle of the earth, but it was all like outside, like there was light and flowers and plants and stuff, and it was this hole right down as far as you could see, and there was this ladder that was kind of like those, like a step ladder that you use for like renovations, where it's just like this and then you just pull it and it's like steps. So it's not just like a ladder, it's like, you know, big enough to be a step, but it was this like step ladder all the way down to as far as you could see, and it was all light, you know, coming through this hole where the ladder was, and it was Apports. It was every gem, crystal, flower, little tiny like Buddha statue, whatever, on each of the steps of the step ladder going forever. And I was like, holy shit, this is where the Apports go. So the thing that I was like, you know, gathering from was that, like, so if you go swimming, you know, people say like, oh my God, I lost my wedding ring in the drain, or I went swimming and I lost it. So this thing was like trying to say that this is all the lost jewelry that people have lost for all of time. It goes in this, on these steps in this ladder all the way down, and then that's where Mychael gets them from. So he's just like taking them from this, like, I don't know how you can say it, but this astral plane of like lost gems and jewelry and stuff. And so it's just really getting dematerialized by this holding place for where all the lost things go. And then he's just like taking them, putting them there. And then some of them dematerialize from when they're given to the person. They just go back right to this step ladder. But it was so crazy because I could still see it's like this, you know, I can't even explain it, but like vines going up. It was like a spiral staircase kind of, except it was this step ladder, but it was just like a hole in the ground, but light coming in on all sides. And it was just like this, like, you know, mystical, magical place, but it was literally just like this step ladder of where every Apport in history is from. And so the spirits are just like, oh, this is easy. We'll just like take this handful or whatever, just like basically dematerialize a handful and just throw it through. And then it somehow comes through the portal in Michael's mouth, right? But they're just taking it off of one of the steps of this ladder.
Maybe that's what my socks went.
And I just thought of another thing. I want to ask Matt the last question about what it's been like to have Desta there now for a year, because, you know, you got a pretty high end sort of spiritual person who knows everything about everything and is working in this field, how it's changed your life. But you asked the question of how Apports, what it means, and the way, if you look at now Skinwalker Ranch, the way Skinwalker Ranch became famous was the Shermans are there, and they had 20 Apport experiences that we have in the book where they move stuff around. They didn't want you digging in the ground. So the guy's putting a post hole auger, and suddenly the post hole auger is gone, and they find it 50 foot up in a cotton tree and stuff like that. And what happened was the woman comes home with the groceries, and she takes all the groceries and puts them in the cupboards and goes to the next room, comes back, and all the groceries are back in the bag. So everybody says, well, it's UFOs at Skinwalker. And I go, so it came a billion galaxies across over here, and then to play with some woman's groceries. Come on. And so they have these Apports experiences. And then what happens is that they're talking to each other, and they say, oh no, I hope they don't fool around with the bulls. They got these 4 prize bulls that are worth who knows how much money. And within an hour, he comes out and the bulls are gone. And he's going, whoa, no, the bulls. And he looks, and there's a trailer it's all tied together with wire to lock it up and stuff like that. And he looks inside, and the bulls are all squished inside this trailer. And so they do that. And then, of course, Bob Bigelow has all his money, and he puts $3.7 million into UNLV to research consciousness, and he's into UFOs and life after death. He finds out about this ranch. He says, well, I should buy that ranch and try to explain it. And then he gets the ranch, and they document all these weird things that happen on the ranch. And then George Knapp and Colm Kelleher write a book, and that book goes to the Middle East. And the Middle East, all the DIA guys are reading this Skinwalker Ranch book, and they're all fascinated with this book. And so they say, well, we got to go there. And then the head guy from the DIA goes in there, and this thing appears that from the symbol from The Exorcist. This symbol is behind, floating in the kitchen, and they're almost like saying, welcome, doctor, we thought you'd never show up. And they're showing up, and then they bring in the DIA. They spent $22 million investigating all this weird stuff at Skinwalker Ranch. And now you can go to the farthest corner of the world anywhere, and you can say, Skinwalker Ranch, yeah, I know what that is. Yeah, Skinwalker Ranch. It's so famous now. And it's this whole thing. It started with these Apports that it just raises this sort of consciousness. Area 51, people are starting to get used to the fact that, yeah, this weird stuff is happening, rather than confronting someone face to face and trying to convince them. You have it as indirect stuff coming through TVs and stuff like that. But it all started with these Apport events that started at Skinwalker Ranch, which makes it this thing that has the highest, History Channel audience there is, and everybody's watching it. And yet you see the stuff they're doing every week on Skinwalker. What are they doing? It's never the same thing. It's like one day they're drilling, and the drill won't go through the thing, and it gets stopped by something, and then there's something above the triangle, and then they fool around with the helicopter, and it's every day they're doing something weird, and these guys are going, what's going on? And they just show this, and here's another thing, another thing, another thing. It's all these weird things, and nothing really makes sense, and it's all this wow stuff. You're just going like, wonder what's going to happen at Skinwalker Ranch this week. It's just another weird thing, just like they're showing off to get us to realize the world is much more complex than we think it is. Or I don't know if I told you this one, Desta. Mike Clellan, we're going to be speaking. I'm going to be speaking at the conference, and you're going to be there down at the MUFON conference. And Mike Clellan is there. And I don't know if you heard Mike. Have you heard Mike Clellan's regression that he did with Yvonne Smith? He has this experience where he's going back from Laughlin up to, he was living in Idaho. And he, always sleeps outside. So he gets a sleeping bag, and he finds a turn off, and he gets a sleeping bag, and he's lying in a sleeping bag in the desert in Utah. And he wakes up, and he sees this thing up on top of the hill, and it looks like a big giant UFO sitting on top of the hill. And he says, that's kind of weird. And he's looking at it. And then he goes back to sleep. And so he wants regression done. So he goes to Yvonne Smith, and he says, do the regression. And basically what it is suddenly they pull him out of his body, and he's above the craft, and he's looking down at the craft. And then suddenly he's on the craft, and he's in front of this council, and they're saying to him, he's going, well, what's going on? Well, why am I here? And they said, it's time. You volunteered for this. And he said, what do you mean it's time? What do you mean it's time? But time for what? And then they said, it's time. You need to get busy. It's time you volunteered for this. And suddenly he remembers what the volunteer was. And he starts crying and swearing. You told me it was going to be this difficult. You didn't tell me there would be pain. And he's yelling and screaming. And then they sort of calm him down. And then he asked Yvonne, he said, while I'm under, asking me about the owls. So the owls are like Apports. So he says, ask me about the owls. What's the deal with owls? Why am I so obsessed with owls my whole life? He's written these 3 books and 2 books on owls or whatever. And so she at that point, he calms down about the fact that he's supposed to do something. He actually starts the owl book 2 days later. But anyway, he's sitting there and he calms, you can hear him calming down. And then she says, oh, so what's with the owls? And he says, and he goes almost like he's channeling. He goes from this little whispery voice up to this completely clear voice. And he said, they're not important. The owls don't mean anything. The owls are just a symbol. The owls are a symbol that are attached to a door. It's the door that's important. When you see the symbol, you go to the door, and then you're sitting there and you're wondering, why is this symbol on the door? And then you see the door and you say, I wonder what's on the other side of the door. And you open the door and you realize this vast universe, all this sort of stuff. And all they're doing is they're moving you from one door to the next. Open this door. Now open this door. And they're dragging you along with these breadcrumbs from one thing to another.
Yeah, absolutely. That absolutely makes sense. That's what I think it is too. Yeah.
That's what's like living with Desta a bit. one weird synchronicity to another, and then like we find one book and then we watch one show and then one email, and it just keeps going on. Breadcrumbs.
But you got to remember, it's time, Matt. A year ago, it's time. You volunteered for this.
Right.
Thank you very much. And
yes,
when you get the interview for some of these people and follow up and keep me in touch when I'm going to fly down there. And I'm all excited. It's different than going to the States where you have to, go in there and, get your insurance and all this kind of stuff. Canada, it's really easy now with these airlines. They've made it very easy for us to fly in and do this. And you're right in the center of the center of the universe, Toronto. You're at the center of the universe
exactly.
Yeah, we're about 5 minutes from the airport too.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, so looking forward to it, and we'll leave it at that. Thanks, and we're going to be in August in Cincinnati, Ohio. You'll be there. We'll have a table there, and anybody wants to tell us some Apport stories or physical mediums or anything like that, we'll have our books there. And thank you, Desta, for all you've done in terms of the YouTube. This YouTube channel wouldn't have existed because I'm sort of like I'm not a technical guy. It was you that suggested this, so I owe a lot to you in terms of editing the books, and Matt for doing the covers. Most people don't know you're the guy who does all these covers that people are all in awe about. And thank you for what you do, and let's keep going.
Thanks, Grant.
Yeah. Thanks, Grant.
Thank you.